Hi, my name is Joe Meyer and I'm here with Tall Pines Conservancy today to take you on a nature walk. So come join me. Here we have what's called a goldenrod gall, and inside here is actually a living insect that a goldenrod fly laid the larvae on last year. That larvae burrowed inside this goldenrod plant. In response, the plant built this apartment around it called a gall, G-A-L-L, and inside here the insect is developing and is going to pupate into a fly. And it's created its exit tunnel already, and it's just waiting until a few more weeks here and it'll exit out of that gall. So anytime you have a food source sitting inside here, especially during the winter months or early spring, before there's a lot of food available, birds like downy woodpeckers or black-capped chickadees will utilize this as a food source. There's also a wasp that'll lay its egg inside the goldenrod gall, and it'll parasitize or eat the fly larvae. So you even have a parasite on a parasite. All kinds of stuff going on here right in a prairie in southeast Wisconsin. Here we have an eastern bluebird box, and these have been very successful in helping bluebirds rebound. Eastern bluebirds are a cavity nester, so they like to nest inside holes in big dead trees. And with fewer and fewer large dead trees to choose from, these nest boxes create a great spot for them to nest. So you can see in here we have a nest that is utilized by bluebirds. Right now you also see some feathers tucked in here. So anytime you see feathers inside the nest, you actually likely have a tree swallow, which is another great bird that inhabits these prairie areas. So in this bluebird nest box, we actually have a nest from last year from a house wren. So house wrens are notorious for utilizing bluebird boxes, and they're small little birds that are very, very vocal. You might see them even in your own backyards. But oftentimes, even after bluebirds are done hatching their chicks and fledging their chicks, you'll see house wrens that'll take over that nest for their late season brood. Open fields like this behind me are a super important display ground for one of our bizarre nighttime creatures, the American woodcock. American woodcocks have a very long beak for probing for insects and worms in the ground, and really, really big eyes to be able to see at night. And during the spring months, the male American woodcock does his flight displays, where he'll call for a female and then fly over 200 feet in the air, making various noises, and then doing his falling leaf display down to the ground to the same spot that he left. Here we are at a beautiful pond in Wetland, where in springtime you can hear a lot of our frogs calling, starting with chorus frogs, some of our first frogs to begin calling, and then later on green frogs and bullfrogs. And it's places like this with a diversity of habitats that is what Tall Pines does so great, preserving these for future generations. Here we are in a beautiful deciduous woodland, one of the great places that Tall Pines Conservancy has preserved. And these are really important places for our birds, not only for nesting during the summer, but in these next few weeks in the beginning of May to mid-May, we get our migrating birds, especially our warblers, some of those birds that are moving really far north and we won't see again until the fall. So keep your eyes up in those trees and be looking for those migrating birds. Our early wildflowers are called spring ephemerals because they don't last a long time. They actually run their whole life cycle before those leaves bud out on the trees so they can get enough sunshine. This one is one called wild leek, and it's actually a wild edible that some people will forage for. And as long as all the leaves aren't taken off of it, it can be sustainable. This little beauty here is called hepatica, and it's one of the first flowers to bloom in our woodlands, and the leaves stay green all winter long. Right behind it here, you can actually see an invasive species called garlic mustard. So it's really important in these areas where we get our spring ephemerals, our wildflowers blooming, to make sure that we're pulling out some of those invasive species. Garlic mustard can actually make a really good garlic pesto. So not only can you pull it out of your woodlands, but you could even make a meal out of it. Here we are by a nice mature red oak tree. And even though much of the top has broken off this tree and it's hollow throughout much of it, a lot of our animal species depend on this, including flying squirrels, eastern screech owls, and a lot of our songbirds. Springtime in Wisconsin can often include looking for some of our delicious mushrooms like morel mushrooms. And for morel mushrooms, one of the things you want to look for is big dead elm trees like this, where the bark is either coming off or has fallen off already. And in middle May, in the last weeks of May, you want to look in those areas for the morel mushrooms that'll be growing. One of our spring ephemerals, as you can see here, is called bloodroot, named after kind of the blood-looking sap that comes out of the roots when they're broken apart. And these don't last very long. These are one of those spring ephemerals that just spend, you know, about a month going through their life cycle before the leaves come out on the trees. These are actually planted by ants. So on the seed, there's a little fatty deposit that the ants will take down into their nest to eat. And once they've eaten that deposit, they'll actually rid the seed in their nest. And that's actually planted the seed for the bloodroot. Next to it, we also see this that looks like grass, which is actually a sedge, similar to grasses, grows in our woodlands called Pennsylvania sedge. So we'll see that in our Wisconsin woodlands this time of year as well. On behalf of Tall Pines, I want to thank you for joining me on our nature walk today. Be sure to stay in touch with Tall Pines throughout the summer for great programming and events. Thank you.